Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to create another web application, and this web application will use web controls rather than HTML controls. And as you'll see, it's generally much easier using the high-level controls than using the HTML controls. So let's create a new website. File, new website. I'm going to call the website Web Controls Demo. Okay, there it is. Let's just switch back into Design View. And, well, I'm going to add an HTML table like we did last time. And that's quite allowable to mix and match HTML controls and web controls in the same page. And it's actually quite common, in fact. So let's drag a table control onto our surface and make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Let's add some more columns. Insert column to right. And another one. Insert column to right. And close the HTML tab, and on the standard tab, let's drag a label and put it in the first cell. And we'll set the various properties on the label. So we'll set its ID. Now, strictly speaking, I don't really need to do this because I'm not going to be interacting with the label in my code. But I think it's a good habit to get into, to always choose meaningful names, even for your labels, because you never know. So let's call it name label, and let's set the text property to be name. Okay, back up. Let's just rectify the layout of this table a little bit. There we go. And we're going to add a text box control. And let's set the text box ID to be name text box. Okay. And if I wanted to, I could set various other properties on the control, but I'm not going to bother doing that just here. We'll add another label, and that will represent the age. So we'll call that age label. And we'll set the text to be age. And let's add another text box where the user can actually enter their age. And let's set the ID to be age text box. And let's set the other properties. Well, we'll just leave the other properties as they stand. Okay, let's just make that the right size. And let's shrink the middle column because that's just a separator. Okay, what's next? Nationality. Let's add another label to represent nationality. Hope you're keeping up okay here. Let's call that label nationality label. And let's set the text to be nationality. Now at this point I want to have a drop-down list box. When we were using HTML controls, if you remember, I used a select control and I had to manually add each option to that select control by going into the source view. Well, we don't need to do any of that when we're using web controls because there's a high-level class called drop-down list. We can just drag one of those directly onto our page and it makes life a lot easier. So straight away you'll notice some differences. This box that's just popped up is called a smart tag, and it enables you to set some of the common properties on a control, such as data binding. So for example, I could bind this control, my list box, to a data source, such as a database, and I could fetch the data from that database and automatically display the results in my control. So that's very cool. I'm not going to do that just yet though, because we'll cover that in another lesson. So I'll just hide the smart tag by clicking on the little arrow there. And what I'll do instead is I'll specify the items via the properties. So in the properties window, there's an items property. And if you select that, an ellipse appears. If I double click the ellipses, this is the easy way for adding fixed items to a list box. So I click the add button and I can add some items. So the text property will be displayed to the user, and the value property is like an internal programmatic value which represents the selected item. So let's enter some countries. We'll enter Canada, and it sets the text and the value to be Canada. And we'll add another one. So we'll go for Denmark, and we'll add just a few more. We'll add in France, and we'll also add in Wales, which is my country, Wales. There we go. And we click OK. Let's just have a look at the source to see what's been added. it's added an ASP drop-down list control. And, oh, the ID, we forgot to set the ID. Let's set the ID to something like nationality list. The run@server, you'll notice, is automatically set on each of these controls because web controls are always mapped to corresponding objects in the code behind class. The run@server attribute is already there on each of our controls, so we don't need to add it in manually. So there's our drop-down list, and you can see that each item we added is represented by an ASP list item control. Okay, let's go back to the designer. Now, the next thing we want to add is the ability to select programming languages. So we'll add a label and set the ID for the label to be languages label. And let's set the text to be languages. Okay, and now we add some checkboxes. Now, typically with checkboxes, you add a collection of checkboxes all at once. So there are two controls here, checkbox, which represents one item, one checkbox, or checkbox list, which is a convenient wrapper if you have a collection of them. So that's what we have here. So let's drag a checkbox list onto our web page. And straight away, again, we have the smart tag that enables us to bind to some data dynamically if we want to. We don't, so let's just get rid of that smart tag. And instead, we'll come down to the properties window and set some properties on that checkbox list. So we'll call the ID languages list, and we'll add some items. So I'll click on the ellipses, and the text we'll display will be visual basic, and let's set the programmatic value to be something different just for the sake of it. So let's set that to be VB, and click add again, and this time we'll add the value and text visual C#. The value will be C#, and the next item is going to be visual J#, and the value is going to be J#. Okay, we're done. So there we are. That's quite a convenient way of setting the checkbox. You can see that the items have text, and also some other properties you can set if you want to. You can specify whether the checkboxes flow left to right or top to bottom. There's a repeat direction property, which is currently set to vertical. I can set that to horizontal if I want to, and the items appear horizontally spread out. I think I preferred vertical.